My name is Simo Hakkarainen, a service designer at Futurice, or Futurice, as they say in Finland. I'm specialized in lean analytics and lean product development and product management. And today, I would like to share a couple of things related to data-driven design in lean service creation process. Let's start with lean startup. Build, measure, learn. Could I get a show of hands who's familiar with lean startup? Like 90% of people. It's good. So for those who didn't know or are not that familiar with it, just like super briefly, it's about constant cycle of learning, building, measuring, and learning. And the key point here is to go through this cycle as quickly as possible and with most learning as possible. And that's how you get greatest likelihood of success in digital business. Old stuff. What we've noticed at Futurice is it's sometimes actually like surprisingly challenging to go through this cycle without any disturbances or challenges. And especially if the measure part is kind of like overlooked, then we don't know what to measure. We don't get any relevant insights or relevant ideas. So the process kind of declines into plain build, and that's not what lean startup is about. And there are certain building blocks that need to take place and need to exist in order to go through this. And just to clarify the point, here's a practical view on what the process is about. I'm not expecting you to read this. It's just to like make the point. There are tons of decisions, choices, informed and non-informed activities, and so on that will influence whether you can actually like make it to the end and actually have a full circle around what you're trying to do. And so why are some companies so successful in doing this, like we heard from Rovio, for example? What is it that takes them around the whole circle? And we had a couple of do's and don'ts. One of them, I found one was missing, so I hope I can bring something new here. It's focus. And I believe that everything comes down from focus. Otherwise, you won't be able to kind of like maintain the discipline throughout the iterative process that's required. And today, my goal is to share 3 perspectives on focus. So, what's relevant for your business? What's relevant for the end user? And what's relevant for the product or service as it kind of like matures over the life cycle? Let's start with business. Like Lassi already said in the beginning, the problem is not about, we have so much data around us, the problem is actually not about the answer, it's about asking the right question. Because the answer is all around us, we just need to know what to ask and we get it. And so I think a vast majority of us are kind of like data rich, but information poor. And everybody should, when starting to build a service, and here's the first kind of like practical template, feel free to borrow if you like. It's a digital marketing and measurement model from Avinash Kaushik, something that I recommend like in every single digital project or product you're starting with. It answers quite nicely the question like, why are we doing this? What are the business objectives we're trying to achieve with this? What are the business objectives in our company? What are the key, must-win battles we need to overcome? And from that, you can take it to the kind of like the service or the product level. So how does this product address these business objectives that we have in our company? Because if you can't answer that question, then you need to start questioning, like, do we really need this service or product? And once you have those service goals in place, then it's actually like quite straightforward to come up with KPIs that measure you if you're actually contributing towards the business objectives. So at the end of the day, having this in your project room's wall gives you quite nice reasoning, like, okay, this is why we're doing this, and this is how we're measuring against, and this is how we're contributing against the business objectives. It also works pretty well with the channel portfolio. So this example could be just one service, but it could also entail like 3 channels if you have like a mobile app, website, and then like a news letter, email campaign or something. So you can have them side by side. You can compare and you can like assign roles for each of those channels. Here's a case example from a project we recently did. I'm sorry for the table, but that's what it is. This was a two-sided marketplace. Two-sided marketplaces are businesses that get revenue from kind of like combining 2 parties or bringing them together. For example, Airbnb, any real estate agency in the world, Uber, Huuto.net, Tori.fi, Amazon, eBay, and so on. And so what we had here was the company had 3 business objectives. So establish #1 marketplace in the domain they are operating, increase sales, and build awareness around the topic they are working with. So once we had these in place, it was actually like quite clear. So what are the service goals? Like if we're building this service, which is a website, so how are we going to address these business objectives? And actually, we made an informed decision in this example not to touch the build awareness at all. We just left it for another channel so that we can keep the focus on the 2 things that we can solve in the beginning. So create inventory, create demand, show listings, provide product information, and enable purchase. So pretty straightforward things, but it still makes sense to have them on the wall so that we know that what we're doing and what we aren't doing. And then it was kind of like straightforward to go towards the key performance indicators. Some of them might be slightly vanity-y, but you can always distract things from the vanity metrics, such as, for example, active sellers might be a number, but it's an important number when you combine it with engaged buyer as a ratio. So when you get that ratio, you know which direction are you going, or you're going, and so on. So that's from the business perspective. I just recommend to have this sort of tool so that when you have these discussions that should we add this feature or should we try to improve this, then you can always go to the board and see if that's what your business is about, or if is that what the product is about. From user perspective, I believe that when it comes to users, what it comes down to is empathy. And you're basically digging for opportunity through caring about people. And in Futurice, this is usually done in different sorts of user sessions. In the Samsung example, it was about user panels, meeting users in groups in the context. In a project I'm currently doing, we had one-to-one interviews just because the context and the topic is a bit different. But there are variations, and we always try to select the best methods for the project. But when you're talking to users, especially when you're having this sort of like a problem interview where you're trying to find a problem worth solving, what you get is pretty like warm and fuzzy qualitative data that's kind of like difficult to grasp. So what we've been doing is that we started to score the interviews based on these 6 questions here. So when you have some sort of tangible score on what the interview was about, you start to get some sort of idea, by no means absolute or academic idea, but still some sort of like grasp of, have we found something? Is this something worthwhile? Should we pursue this further? And because that's what you're doing at this point. You're trying to find a problem worth solving, and you need to be like really conscious about what's going on. Do we have something? And this, when you're answering yes, sort of, and no, there's a guideline how you can score them, and then you get a score. And if it's over something, I suppose it's 30. If it's over 30, you're good. If it's under, you need to think about why you're under 30 and so on. I can give you a more accurate guideline during the coffee break, if you like. Another thing, once you start to have some sort of prototypes or mock-ups, and you have some sort of solution to the idea that you have come up with in your design team, you're starting to show it to the end users and see, is there something that we've been able to produce that's interesting or valuable or worthwhile from the customer point of view. So this is really nice, kind of like a scoring 2x2. Every presentation has to have a 2x2 when it comes to analytics. And what we do is we ask whether we've done something, whether we've solved a problem that the customer feels is important, and how are they satisfied with the solution. And you can do this with a survey, but it works better when you're doing it in the kind of like a prototype testing session. And you start to see these kind of groups here, and you can see which solutions are working. Are we solving the right problems? Are we solving them the right way? Is there something we should skip? Because if we're solving some like non-important problem, it's probably worth skipping. And if there's something like the number 50 and 55 over there, is there something that we should improve so that the solution is better? You can also do this internally with your design team. It's also better than doing nothing. For example, with like a card sort or planning poker session or something like this. We've talked about these metrics quite a bit already today. These are the 4 like super metrics, well, not necessarily super metrics, but something worth considering every time when you need to know or when you need to answer, are we engaging our users? Are we providing something worthwhile to them? Are we solving their problems in a way that makes them come back? So retention, churn, virality, and net promoter score. And there are some rules of thumb on each of these that provide you the baseline that you can always compare yourself against. And then you know that, is there something we should do? None of these are like one size fits all. Like all the companies, all the services are probably different. But this is something that gets you started. You can compare your company against these numbers and see. And if you differ drastically from these numbers, then you need to, at least you know what to look at. So for retention, this is sort of like a 30-10-10 rule. is something worth taking a look. It means that 30% of people who have registered or downloaded, so registered to your web service or downloaded your mobile app, will use the service monthly. So basically 30% monthly retention. It differs between industries quite widely. 10% of those people use it every day, and 10% of daily users use it at the same time. Like I said, rule of thumb, take a look at your data and see how much you differ from these numbers. Churn, industry kind of like best practice or goal post is to target somewhere between 2 and 5. The best software as a service companies can take it like 1.5 even. That's really good. But somewhere along the lines. So that's the number of people you lose, for example, in a month. And virality, there are no one normal that you should target, but everybody should target to virality or viral coefficient of 1, which means that your service is self-sufficient. So basically all the users you have invite another user. So basically it just like grows on its own. But for example 50 or like 0.5 is quite good as well. And there are no like target this for net promoter score. It differs quite widely between industries. So finally, how do the things we measure or the things that are relevant to us differ between product phases? This is also a pretty good quote. It really comes down to focus on the right things. Here's the Futurice lean service creation process, starting from business idea, continuing with the sort of like a service vision sprint, where the main goal is finding a problem worth solving. Once we have some sort of good idea about the MVP, we're going to launch one. Then we are working towards finding a product market fit, and finally scaling and tweaking. And it goes from days to years. It's a long life cycle, and what's relevant to you and as designers or product managers is which metrics should we look at in each of these phases. Here's another project example. It's a mobile app. I'm sorry about the boxes and arrows, but that's the only way to communicate this. So this is what we started once we had the app. Just like basically one metric that's derived from 3 metrics. So the amount of downloads, the amount of launches, and the amount of engaged users you get. And the key here was the amount of engaged users. Because when we had identified the engaged users, it's kind of easy to start learning from them. How do they differ from the non-engaged users? How should we improve the service and move on with this? But as fast as possible, it's good to start moving towards the business goals. Take the business because, as in the Rovio example, the business is why you're doing these things. So it's really, really useful to have it as soon as possible. The average value per user can be determined from the digital marketing and measurement model that I showed you earlier. So things that contribute to the bottom line, you can add here. And once you know how valuable one user is for you, that basically opens up the game quite a bit. Because then when you multiply the average value per user with the amount of engaged users you have, there you have it, value generated that month. Easy to communicate in a steering group and sprint planning, what have you. It goes further. When you know that what you've built is good and it sticks, it's time to start like pouring people in with customer acquisition, either organic or paid, preferably both. So bring in like churn, customer lifetime. So how long one customer stays with you, and what does it cost to get one customer? And comparing the customer acquisition cost with the value you generate per month, there's already like quite relevant information for you. And finally, and this is the hardest part, innovation accounting, what you should be targeting, the whole box of metrics. It's a table how to calculate if you're doing the right thing and if it's actually on a stable ground. For example, the contribution per customer, how much value does one customer do to you, and how much can you afford to spend on acquisition. And to summarize, this is my last slide, is a table. On the left, all of the phases that we have in the lean service creation process. On the right-hand side, the baseline metrics to focus on. And as you can see, it starts with, do we have a problem worth solving? Do we have a solution that meets the needs? Moving towards engagement, retention, and churn. And then you get the virality, and so on. That's something to guide you with the digital-driven or data-driven design and product management. I hope I've covered everything. I had 3 points about what's relevant for your business, what's relevant for the end user, and what's relevant and how it changes as your product evolves. Thank you.